Welcome to the Midnight Narrator, where shadows whisper and the unseen becomes the unforgettable. Tonight's gripping tale, Beneath the Mask, delves into the life of a seemingly perfect neighbor whose charm hides a chilling secret. How well do you really know the people around you? Because sometimes the kindest smiles conceal the darkest intentions. Ready to unmask the truth? When I was 11, I was struggling in school until our teacher, Mr. Davies, seated me next to the new student. Finn and his family arrived mid-semester, a sudden addition to our class. During his second week, Mr. Davies tried to engage him by asking about his favorite hobbies. "Hobbies?" Finn replied, a puzzled expression on his face. This elicited some giggles. Everyone assumed he was feigning ignorance for attention. Instead, he remained quiet and excelled in every subject. Several classmates attempted to befriend him, drawn to his quiet intensity, but found him unsettling after brief conversations during lunch. As assigned seatmates, Finn and I clashed. I'm right-handed, and our arms frequently brushed while writing. He became agitated whenever I asked to borrow an eraser, which naturally I did repeatedly. Whenever I requested Mr. Davies to move me, he'd simply say, "Ethan, you'll encounter people you don't connect with throughout life. Learn to adapt." One day, while I struggled with a challenging science assignment, Finn offered assistance. He'd finished early and seemed restless, a strange energy radiating from him. It resulted in my first high grade in the class. Without any formal agreement, he began helping me with difficult homework and projects, significantly improving my grades. As a reward, my parents bought me a new telescope. I offered Finn a turn to look through it, but he didn't even know what a telescope was. Then, unexpectedly, he invited me to stay at his house. "My parents are eager to meet you," he said. I wondered why his parents even knew about me. We simply sat next to each other in class. Our interactions were minimal. However, I wanted to express my gratitude for his help, and my parents consented. So that Friday, I packed an overnight bag and walked to his house. I walked along several quiet streets lined with older houses, past a small park, towards the edge of town. Finn's two-story house sat at the end of a long, slightly overgrown driveway. The windows were covered with heavy drapes, obscuring any view inside. An unsettling feeling settled over me as soon as I arrived. Finn and his parents greeted me at the door, each with an unnervingly wide smile. They all had similar dark hair and wore muted shades of blue, green, and gray. A tall woman introduced them as the Millers. My young mind perceived her and her husband as older, but looking back, they were likely in their 40s. They carried themselves with an unnatural stillness like figures in a painting. Mr. Miller took my bag while Finn and I followed his wife inside. The house felt strangely empty. There was no personal clutter, no signs of children living there. The furniture appeared antique, older than anything in my grandparents' house. In every room, tapestries hung on the walls, covered by thin sheets. Mrs. Miller emphasized that touching the coverings is strictly prohibited. They maintain the balance. She led us to a room with several bookcases filled with old, leather-bound books. We sat on a worn rug, facing each other. The only sound was the quiet hum of an old refrigerator from the kitchen. Mr. Miller joined us and led a quiet reflection on themes of nature and the changing seasons. Although I occasionally attended services with my aunt, I couldn't identify their specific beliefs. He seemed to view himself as a guide, frequently mentioning the importance of balance and the dangers of disruption. "We are keepers," he said once, his eyes fixed on some unseen point beyond me. "We maintain the order of things." During a moment of contemplative silence, I heard a faint, rhythmic tapping sound. I focused, trying to discern the source. It sounded like something tapping lightly against wood, from somewhere within the room. I cautiously opened one eye. No one was looking, but the unwavering smiles on their faces made me uneasy. I glanced around the room. We were alone. I closed my eyes, eager to leave. The silence stretched on. Finally, Mr. Miller announced it was time for a nature walk. As we left the room, I listened for the tapping, but it had ceased. I assumed I'd imagined it. Finn and I walked along a nearby trail, his parents watching from a distance. Like in class, Finn walked at a slower pace than me. We talked about nature and the local plants and animals, trying to avoid any discussion of personal matters. Finn seemed different away from his parents. In class, he sometimes showed glimpses of humor, but now he spoke only about the natural world, reciting facts about different species. I steered the conversation away from his family as much as possible. My legs were tired by the time Mrs. Miller called us back for a simple meal of vegetable stew and homemade bread. Before we ate, everyone held hands for a moment of quiet reflection. I wished it would last longer, delaying the meal. A heavy silence descended, then the tapping sound returned. Closer than before, it sounded like small claws scratching. If not for the fear of another unwavering smile from Finn's mother, I would have looked around. As the reflection continued, the scratching grew more frantic, until something bumped against the wall behind me. Mr. Miller's voice rose louder now and masked the sound. I wasn't sure what frightened me more, but I felt a chill. The reflection ended a few minutes later, and we sat in silence until Mr. Miller announced, "Balance restored." I checked the corners of the room, finding only more covered tapestries. What was making the sound? A small animal? My imagination? The stew was bland. I didn't want to be impolite, so I ate a small portion and arranged my bowl to appear as if I'd eaten more. There was fruit for dessert, which Mrs. Miller served onto our bowls, still containing remnants of the stew. My stomach churned, but I ate the top layer of fruit that hadn't touched the stew. I wanted to leave. Feigning a headache, I asked if they could call my parents. Mr. Miller raised an eyebrow. "That won't be necessary. We have a remedy." He instructed the others to offer blessings for my well-being and led me from the room. The front door was to my left, and I briefly considered running, but Mr. Miller's hand tightened on my shoulder. His smile remained, but his eyes conveyed a silent warning. I allowed him to guide me to a small room. There was a covered mirror above a small table, and a large wooden box sat in the corner. Mr. Miller placed a few smooth stones into a small bowl and instructed me to hold it. I told him my headache had miraculously subsided. "The power of focus," he said, his smile unwavering. He then announced it was time for rest, even though it was still daylight. Upstairs, at the end of the hall, a large object covered by a sheet stretched across the width of the hallway. I was shown to Finn's room, even simpler than the rest of the house. A small bed, a simple table, and a single wooden stool. We were to share the bed, but only after another moment of quiet reflection. Then, the lights were turned off. Alone with Finn, I asked about his family's beliefs. He gave vague answers, becoming defensive when I pressed him. So, I changed the subject. That made him laugh. Away from his parents, he seemed more like himself from school. Not entirely typical, but closer. We talked about school and other trivial things. I inadvertently mentioned a classmate who often teased him, and his demeanor shifted. "I know people think I'm strange," he sighed. "They just need to get to know you," I said. "They'll understand." "Do you think so?" "Definitely." He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes for the first time. After a pause, he whispered, "Want to see something unusual? If you think you're brave enough?" I rolled my eyes. He was trying to tease me, like when we walked along the trail. "Sure. We have to wait until my parents are asleep." I asked what he had planned, but he wouldn't reveal anything. He seemed to enjoy the secrecy. He waited until the house was quiet, then quietly got out of bed. "This way." In the dim hallway, moonlight filtered through the windows beside the staircase. As we crept past several closed doors, the tapping sound returned, growing louder as we neared the covered object. It hadn't been my imagination. Turning to me, Finn whispered, "Don't look directly at it. You'll be all right as long as you look away quickly. It feeds on direct attention." Before I could ask what he meant, he crouched and pulled back a corner of the sheet, revealing a large, ornate clock. The tapping seemed to emanate from within its wooden case. A circular glass panel covered the clock face, surrounded by intricate carvings. Finn pressed his ear to the wood and peered at the glass. "It's there. Look quickly." I wanted to finish this quickly. I crouched down. For a moment I saw only the reflected hallway, confused. Then a distorted shape caught my eye. I told myself it was my reflection, but then realized I wasn't reflected at all. A figure stood within the clock, its back to us. Its shoulders moved rhythmically, as if it was breathing heavily. The wood of the clock case seemed to vibrate with each breath. "Do you see it?" Finn whispered, his voice laced with a strange mix of fear and fascination. I swallowed hard, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the cool night air. "Interesting, isn't it?" Finn continued, his eyes wide. "It's been there for as long as I can remember. My parents, they feed it. With disruptions." My mind searched for an explanation. It was a trick, a cruel joke. I glanced behind me. Nothing. Only the bare wall. "It's not here," Finn said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Only in the glass. It exists in the reflection, in the space between moments." When I looked back, the figure was closer, pressed against the glass, its features distorted, elongated, like a reflection in a warped mirror. It had a shock of dark hair much like Finn's. Its thin mouth stretched into a grotesque grimace as it reached out, its fingertips seeming to press against the glass, almost breaking through. I froze, unable to move until its face was inches from mine, a rush of cold air brushing my face, carrying a faint scent of damp earth and something metallic. I recoiled. My throat tightened, preventing a scream. Finn quickly dropped the sheet and pulled me up, shoving me down the hall. Behind us, the clock case rattled, its hinges creaking, the heavy breathing growing more rapid, interspersed with sharp, clicking sounds like bone on bone. Back in his room, Finn pressed his ear against the door until the clock fell silent. "We're fortunate my parents didn't hear," he whispered, his breathing shallow. They wouldn't be pleased. They instructed us not to rise before they begin the morning observation." He seemed unfazed by what we'd seen, ushering me into bed and falling asleep almost immediately. But my body trembled. What was that thing in the clock? Were there others? Was that why the tapestries were hung? To contain them? But why keep any mirrors at all? And what did Finn mean by disruptions? I knew I couldn't stay in that house, but Finn's parents wouldn't let me leave. I needed to escape undetected. After Finn's breathing became deep and even, I carefully got out of bed and tiptoed to the door, heading for the stairs. As I reached the top, heavy footsteps echoed from below. I ducked behind the nearest door. Through the narrow opening, I saw Mr. Miller walk past, carrying a rectangular object wrapped in a sheet. A faint clinking sound came from beneath the covering. He carried it towards Finn's room, grunting with effort, and disappeared inside. My stomach clenched. I didn't want to know what he intended to do. I hurried down the stairs quietly, keeping close to the wall. The front door was locked. My bag was still in the entryway, I hoped, but how could I reach it unseen? From above, I heard angry whispers. "He's gone. The balance is disrupted." No time to think. I darted through the downstairs rooms. Whispers echoed from each one, and the objects beneath the tapestries seemed to shift and writhe. The heavy breathing from the clock returned, more panicked now, mixed with the scratching of countless claws on wood. Past the dining room, I found a small storage room with another door. The air grew colder as I rushed through it into a back porch. The light switch was on the inside wall. I flicked it, and a dim bulb flickered on. Tools and gardening supplies were scattered everywhere. Rakes, shovels, bags of soil, and more tapestries covered various shapes, each one trembling slightly. More whispers arose, not just the heavy breathing, and for a moment, I hesitated. A door slammed shut behind me and I bolted. My bag was near the back door, its strap tangled with a watering can. With a sharp tug, it came free, sending the watering can clattering to the floor. I grabbed the bag. The back door had a simple latch. My hands shook so badly I had to set the bag down and focus on the latch. The door swung open. Behind me, Mr. Miller burst into the room, his smile gone, replaced by a look of wild desperation. He lunged towards me, stumbling over the scattered gardening tools. My bag caught on something as I ran, and when I pulled it free, a tapestry was yanked from the wall. I heard something heavy fall to the floor and shatter. Whispers erupted, and as I glanced back, thin, dark tendrils reached out from the broken object towards Mr. Miller, wrapping around him, pulling him down. As the porch light flickered erratically, Mr. Miller screamed. I would never forget the sound. Adrenaline propelled me forward. I ran down the path and out onto the street. Behind me, screams echoed from the house, then abruptly stopped, leaving an unsettling silence. I didn't stop running. My parents were concerned about me returning so late, but I made up a story about Finn's family having an emergency, and they accepted it. I knew they wouldn't believe the truth. I feigned illness to avoid school, dreading seeing Finn again. I spent the weekend replaying the events in my mind. On Monday, Finn sat silently at his desk. We never spoke again, and our arms never brushed. To my immense relief, Mr. Davies announced the next day that Finn's family had moved. I never saw him again, although for a long time I had nightmares about his parents dragging me back to their house, and the memory returns whenever I see a large, ornate clock. And that's the end of Beneath the Mask, a facade of kindness, shattered by the revelation of a twisted truth. We think we know the people in our lives, but every smile, every kind word, might be hiding something far darker. If tonight's story made you question what lies behind the masks of those around you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more captivating tales. Until next time, remember, the brightest light casts the darkest shadow. This is the Midnight Narrator, signing off, but always watching.